The flow of daily news and people's arguments about it, following the series of doctrinal ramblings, jurisprudential anomalies, and intellectual fads that spread on social networks, and being drawn into chasing intellectual polemics and petty issues, and continuing to stare in anticipation of their mutual quarrels and teasing, and the unconscious rotation in such a whirlpool, especially via close-knit smartphones, leads one to a gradual separation from the spirit of work, implementation and production, and the feeling that watching and commenting is the natural state experienced by the student of knowledge and the reformer. The issue is no longer just an issue of wasting time, but rather reveals a new, more complex disease, as this aforementioned condition stems from an imbalance in web browsing. It gradually leads to a decline in motivation and a decline in determination, and what mainly helps in strengthening this stagnation, devotion, and dependence on reality is the lack of communication between projects, scientific and practical, or more precisely, the distance of commitment to scientific, cultural, and reform experiments, because the increasing distance between oneself and the producers provides a good environment for continued dozing, while an environment raging with the bustle of the actors expels drowsiness, inflames vitality, and revives motivation. On the other hand, the addiction to following successive online facts, events, and debates creates a pattern of horizontal thinking that only sees the cover and the outer shell of variables, and knows only the final product of perceptions that is presented to the general consumer, because, in short, it has left the production factories for the shopping shelves, and therefore it cannot. Restoring and reclaiming this style can only be done by bringing it back to rehabilitative living in the world of production and touching on its details, difficulties and struggles. And the world of production is scientific expertise and reform experiments. I was, and still am, deeply convinced that one of the greatest cures for surrendering to reality and horizontal thinking is experiencing the experiences of those who have accomplished science, culture, and reform, and mingling with the details of their toil and struggles. Indeed, there are many symbols present today in the media of culture and change that we imagine that we know, but in reality, our knowledge of them is completely inaccurate. It does not go beyond the outer shell, and I hope that the models presented in the third chapter of this study prove part of this hypothesis. Because of that, I realize that the task in addressing this issue is complex. We need scientific, intellectual, and advocacy figures who have a detailed, written position on the problem of excessive preoccupation with following up on events, so that it can be considered an intellectual model, and at the same time we lack living part of these people's experiences in order to invest it in treating the ills of motivation generated by absorption in events, and in order to accurately imagine the position of each character on the issue under investigation. And for this purpose I made the third chapter revolve around the characters. Scientific, intellectual, and advocacy, and each model is dealt with in two parts. The first part is the surroundings of the model, so that we seek to live in it the days of that experience, its perseverance, its measurements, and its experiences. We also draw inspiration from these days for a historical entrance to understand the goals and significance of the conceptual model presented by this character. As for the second section of each character, it is about the components of the model, so that we try to collect its elements through the texts of the character under study and read it in light of the historical data we have previously studied, to provide a better and more accurate understanding as much as possible. In this paper, I will try to review first the limits governing this study and its significance. Then we will discuss together the status of the processes in the perception of Muslim scholars. Then we will move after that to the network processes and modern studies on them and the relationships of those seeking knowledge with them. As for the political processes, we will try to understand them through studying scientific models. A serious and productive intellectual had a position on this problem, as previously mentioned, pointing out that